Hey everybody, I'm Cliff N4CCB. Today I'm going to debunk a dozen QRP myths. It's going to take me about, less than 15 minutes I hope. Let's just jump right into it. Number 12. QRP gear is typically small, but we know that bigger is always better. After all, this is America, damn it. Okay, it's true that as Americans we've developed some pretty cool big things like the Atlas V rocket, the Hummer, the 10-gallon hat. But we've also developed some pretty cool small things like artificial heart valves, the paperclip, and the integrated circuit, aka the microchip. So yeah, bigger is always bigger, but it's often unnecessary. And as QRP guys, we like to do the stuff that guys do with the bigger radios with smaller radios, or using smaller power anyway. All right, number 11. People won't want to talk to you if your signal isn't loud. All right, you don't need to worry about that. First of all, this is not a QRP issue. If you're transmitting 100 watts, your signal still can be not very loud to someone. If the propagation is not good between you, 100 watts isn't going to help either. So a few thoughts on that. Your signal will not be weak to everybody if you're running QRP. If propagation's good, your signal will sound just fine somewhere. And if signal is propagation is good between you and the receiving station, they're not even going to know if you're QRP. So don't go into this thinking that your signal is always going to be weak. That's not the case at all. All right. Another thing is, if you're calling CQ and a station hears you and hears you as weak, like maybe your signal is almost in their noise floor, it's up to them to decide whether they want to try to contact you or not. It's not up to you. So you can have anxiety about whether they're not going to want to talk to you because you're not strong. But it's up to them. It's up to them. Now, so you might be in a situation where they can hear you just enough to go ahead and make that contact, and they might try. They may decide that it's too much work. Maybe your signal's close to their noise floor, and they're just going to turn the big knob and look for somebody else to talk to. That's fine. Now, twist that around. Maybe they're calling CQ. And so you hear them calling CQ, you throw out your call sign, and maybe they can barely hear it, and they just may decide to pretend they can't hear you and listen for a stronger station. And that's okay too. I've done that myself. Again, though, it's not up to you. You do your thing and let the other station decide whether or not you're strong enough to copy. It might be that they have a hard time copying you, but they want to get it in the log, and they'll just maybe have a short contact with you instead of a conversation. That's fine. But again, it's not up to you. Do your thing. Let them figure out whether they want to talk to you. If your signal's strong, no problem. If your signal's weak, they may work you anyway, or they may just pretend. And if they're pretending that they can't hear you, it's not going to hurt your feelings because you'll have no idea that somebody actually does hear you, but doesn't come back to you. All right, next. Number 10. QRP is only for portable ops. Nope. You can work QRP in your ham shack with a big powerful rig just by turning the power down. You don't need a special radio for that. You can certainly do it from inside your house, and you can also chase awards like, say, worked all states. Maybe you want to try for worked all states on 5 watts. So you can still do everything that everybody else does, just using lower power from inside your house if you want to do that. Now, having said that, because if you're running lower power in the field, you're not going to need as many amps. You're not going to use as much current. You can have a smaller, more transportable battery. So that does work in your favor. But you certainly don't need to do it in the field. You can do it at home anytime. Number 9. The goal is to make as many contacts as possible, so I need as much power as possible. All right, ham radio is a big hobby. There are a lot of facets to it. For example, I don't care anything about working satellites, but you might, and that's cool. There's so many things you can do with ham radio. I've actually got 2 people in my life that I know who don't even like to get on the radio and make contacts. They like it for the electronics. So if they get on the radio, it might just be to ask somebody for an audio check for a rig they've been working on or something. And that's fine too. Those guys are hams. The goal for me is not to make as many contacts as possible. Now, let me ask you a question here to help you get your head around that. When you go fishing, are you fishing with a rod and reel or dynamite? Okay, if you want to maximize your fish contacts, dynamite would be the way to go. It's not very sporting. Hard on the fish. And the QRP mindset is kind of like fishing with ultralight tackle or maybe a cane pole. With that kind of gear, whenever you hook a fish of any size, it really feels like you're doing something, right? It's a great feeling of joy that you get by doing something cool with something small or with less. So that's kind of the mindset, and that's what I think you might want to try. Also, to truly maximize your contacts requires a huge financial commitment, right? You're going to have the best receiver possible. You're going to need an amplifier. And if that amplifier doesn't have a built-in tuner and you're not using resonant antennas, you're going to need to have a high-power tuner to go with that amplifier. And if you're trying to maximize your signal, you're going to have a beam antenna. And to use that, you're going to have a tower, which means because of HOA restrictions, you may have to buy another house. And if your wife's not on board, you may have to pay alimony. So it can get expensive if you actually try to maximize your contacts. Next. Number 8. Real hams have an amplifier. I need one to give me street cred. All right, this is sad. Everybody who gets a ham license is a ham. There are no real hams versus hams. Anybody with a license is a real ham. You are not the Velveteen Rabbit. You don't need some old crusty ham radio operator to love you to make you real. That's just not how it works. If you have a license, you are a real ham right now. You don't need an amplifier to be a real ham. All right, moving on. Number 7. QRP requires a fancy, expensive beam antenna to amplify inherently weak signals. Nope. People are using wire dipoles. People are using vertical antennas. People have electrically shortened vertical antennas called ham sticks. If propagation is good between you and the receiving station, practically anything works. I watched my friend Doug Miller, W4DML, work an Australian ham using a ham stick on the gas tank of his motorcycle. And this ham stick that he had, I don't even know what that thing was, but it wasn't a tall ham stick. It was some kind of weird little antenna, and I watched him work that guy in sideband on a KX3 with 5 watts sideband to Australia. And as soon as he worked him, I was using a dipole, and I worked the same guy sideband. So if propagation's good, practically anything works. All right, next. Number 6, a QRP signal, logically, can't travel long distances. Okay, not true. Like I just said, if propagation is good between you and the receiving station, you're going to be able to work them regardless of your power level. They're not even going to know that you're QRP. If their signal is strong to you, then you're probably going to be strong to them. So I recommend that you, if you're starting out with QRP, try just calling the strongest stations, because that's a pretty good indicator that conditions are really good between the two of you, and you'll have a lot more success that way. All right, next one. Number 5, you will turn into some kind of QRP weirdo. Okay, well, I can't really say much about that one because that one is absolutely true. All right, number 4, QRP requires learning Morse code. All right, hang on. Let me back up and talk more about number 5. There's a pretty good probability that you're already a weirdo. You've got a ham license, and most normal people don't have ham licenses, okay? Normal guys are out playing golf right now, or they're home making a smoked brisket. We are not those guys. We're a little different, and we like to do fun things with this ham radio hobby, which is a pretty nerdy hobby, really well matched for weirdos. And I say weirdo as a badge of honor. If your friends and family come to think of you as a QRP weirdo, in my mind, that's a good thing. All right, back to number 4. QRP requires learning Morse code. Not true. You can do single sideband, you can do digital modes. You don't have to use Morse code. Now, having said that, Morse code is fun, and Morse code is very efficient. It uses the continuous wave mode that Morse code travels on, is a pure unmodulated carrier. In other words, unlike voice mode or digital mode, where the signal has to be spread out a little bit, Morse code is a pure tone, pure signal. And so it's more efficient. So you don't need as much power. It can be heard better than sideband. It can be heard in a lower noise floor environment, lower in the noise floor, toward the noise floor, I should say, I guess. Digital modes are great because the software can actually decode in some modes, like FT8. The software can decode signals that really the human ear can't decode. So that's very cool. But Morse code is fun, and one of the cool things about Morse code is that it lets you use those impossibly small, sexy as hell little battery-powered Morse code only radios that a lot of us love so much. Maybe we love them too much. I don't know. Next. Number 3. People won't hear you, so working QRP is frustrating. Okay, well, enough people will hear you that it's not frustrating. And this is the same kind of problem you could have at 100 watts, right? Because at 100 watts, you're not guaranteed to be strong to everybody. At 1500 watts, you're not guaranteed to be strong to everybody. So if your signal is a little weak, that's okay. You're going to be strong to somebody. Chances are pretty good that if you can hear them well, they'll be able to hear you well. So a lot of times when I'm working, I'll just go ahead and write the strong station's call sign down in my logbook as if I'm about to work him. And usually I do, because if they're strong to me, I'm going to be strong enough for them. All right, next. Number 2, transmit 5 watts and your signal will sound 20 times weaker than 100 watts. Well, this makes perfect sense, and it's perfectly wrong. There is not a linear relationship between the number of watts you're putting out and the perceived loudness on the other end. All right, think about this. If you double your power, that's a 3 dB increase. But S units are 6 dB apart. So in ham radio, if you're using HF radio, it's got an S meter, and you can watch that meter and see how your signal fluctuates. I want to challenge you to do this. Go listen to a sideband conversation where you can hear both the hams fine, and just watch your S meter. Now, the reason I want you to do that is because you're going to see that even different words within a sentence, the power is fluctuating. The received signal strength is fluctuating with different words. We don't talk in a monotone where everything is the same amplitude. We don't do that. We emphasize certain words. Words just kind of start falling away as we finish a sentence, right? So your power on the S meter, that received signal strength is fluctuating wildly, and I promise you that you cannot hear the difference in a half an S unit. So if you double your power, you're going to get an extra half an S unit. Conversely, if you cut your power in half, that only makes your signal a half an S unit quieter. Okay? Cut it down by a factor of 4, and you're going to only be 1 S unit quieter than you were. So as long as your signal is above the noise floor for the other station, they'll still be able to hear you. Go look at that S meter and see if they couldn't cut their power by a factor of 4 and be 1 S unit quieter and have you still be able to hear them. That's the difference in being 100 watts versus, say, 25 watts. Okay? Take 25, divide that by 4 again. Now you're at 6.5 watts. Let's just say 5 to make the math easy. That's about 2 S units quieter than 100 watts. And I know you can go to your radio right now, look at a conversation, and do the math and subtract 2 S units from that and see if that's not still above your noise floor. That's why QRP works. All right. Now, this takes us to number 1. Life is too short for QRP. Wow. I have many thoughts on this. I'm just going to keep it short here for you guys. When somebody says life is too short for QRP, you know what comes to mind for me? I want to say, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that you're a guy with a short one. Okay? Life's too short for QRP, only for guys with short ones. Short lives, obviously. What were you thinking? Anyway, that's it. A dozen QRP myths debunked. As always, I welcome your comments, and let's keep it civil. But if you can think of any more QRP myths, I would love to hear them, or your thoughts on any of this craziness. I guess that's it for this one. Everybody have a great weekend. See you later.